series by adding some intentional habits to our lives. And here's the cool part. We're the ones that actually benefit from it. See, I believe that God is going to help us grow in our faith in a huge way moving forward, not just through the duration of the next 5 weeks, but for the duration of the rest of our lives, if we would put into practice these habits of spiritual growth. Okay, so today as we kick off this series, A New Beginning, we're going to look at a story of a woman whose life was forever changed when she met Jesus at a well. She experienced a new beginning, and this morning we're going to talk about having a new heart. Give you a little bit of context here. In John chapter 4, salvation spreads beyond the borders of Israel. In the previous chapter, we hear a conversation between Jesus and a man named Nicodemus, in which Jesus showed Nicodemus his desperate need for a Savior. And now we'll look at Jesus' encounter with a Samaritan woman. And these are two different people from two different cultures with one common need. It was significant that Jesus would be talking to a Samaritan. Jews and Samaritans didn't get along. They had several disagreements about God, but were primarily seen as unfaithful to God because they had intermarried with non-Jewish people. They were seen as half-breeds by the Jews. So intense was their dislike of the Samaritans that some of the Pharisees prayed that no Samaritan would be raised in the resurrection. And when his enemies wanted to call Jesus an insulting name, they often called him a Samaritan. And yet Jesus chose to go to Samaria. I want you to pick up with me in John chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. We read this. Now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. Now, Jesus has been ministering publicly in and around Jerusalem and decided it's time to head back to Galilee. He leaves Jerusalem, the center of Jewish worship, and heads towards Samaria, a foreign land. And what makes this so wonderful is the way in which it actually wasn't true. Geographically, Jesus did not have to pass through Samaria. And for many reasons, it was inconvenient for him to do so. But John informs us that Jesus had to go this way. It was necessary for him. And the reason is his determination to save his own, among whom was this woman by the well. Verse 5. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field of Jacob, had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. And I don't want you to miss this. Jesus, he was wearied. He was tired from his journey. Yes, he was fully God, but he's also fully man. Jesus was wearied from his journey. John wrote his gospel in part to persuade us of Jesus' deity. But scenes such as this also displayed Jesus' full humanity. Jesus was tired and Jesus grew thirsty. He needed rest and something to drink. Serving the gospel is always hard work. And so it was for Jesus. He wearied himself by bringing the gospel to others. And many of us are not effective evangelists because simply we are too lazy and self-centered. We're not willing to cross the street to meet people. We do not care enough for the eternal destiny of friends, family members, or coworkers to risk the social hazard of talking about the Lord. Our lives are so focused on our own needs and those of our families. And for many of us, the first step in evangelism is simply to care enough for the lost to become weary in the gospel. Just as Jesus personally brought the gospel to the Samaritan woman, so also he personally sought out your salvation. If you had heard the gospel And if you've believed, rest assured that it was not by chance. Realizing his loving concern for your soul ought to inspire you to care for the salvation of the people that you know. Jesus and his disciples are taking a long trip, and they decide in the heat of the day to stop and rest. The disciples, they head into town to pick up some food while Jesus rests by the well. He's not there long when a woman approaches the well to draw some water. And Jesus turns to her and asks her